TFT has a new patch that's dropping out today. This patch is a little bit different if you listen to Mortdog over the weekend on his YouTube channel. They changed some of the things that were coming in that patch. I think the player base had some questions that were on some of the things that were being changed that got pulled back, and there were a handful of other things that probably needed a change that got much needed love, I would say. Anyway, the key thing is we're getting near the end of set 4, so the end of Chosen's too. Yeah, my cheers. I'm actually getting kind of tired of Chosen's, to be honest. It's wore out. It's welcome to me. It's fun when it started, not so fun anymore. But more importantly, odds are we're not going to see a B patch. Very, very unlikely we see a B patch with this, but still possible. But this will be a lead into a lot more of the tournaments that are going on, and I wouldn't expect to see a lot of major changes to set 4 as we move into the end of the set. Now that's over with. Let's move on down and talk about some of the changes. First off, the Debuff Overhaul. There was actually a lot more to this before this patch came down, but they pulled a good bit of the actual changes that were made to this back. But the overall heart of it is going to stay, and this is a real long-term change for TFT. So in general, debuffs of the same type no longer stack. So if you have multiple armor shred debuffs, if you have multiple attack speed debuffs, they do not stack. Instead, over the duration of those debuffs, the highest will take priority over the lowest. You still have that duration. So let's say you have a 6-second armor shred. During that 6-second armor shred, you have a 3-second armor shred that's like 100% armor shred. Infinitely more than the 50% you had at 6 seconds. During that 3 seconds, you have the 100%. Outside of that, during the 6-second duration of the 50% armor shred, you have 50%. So they don't stack, they just override each other during their durations with the highest taking priority. Simple? Easy? So what does this impact? This mostly impacts burn damage effects, so like Morello and Sunfire Cape. The higher of the two will take priority, which if I recall correctly is Morello. I think Morello takes priority. Attack speed slowdown, which is actually very relevant in this set because there is a lot of abilities that lower your attack speed. Like Adept, Frozen Heart. There's a handful of abilities that slow attack speed, like Nautilus, not Nautilus, shoot, I'm blanking. Nah, whatever. Anyway, so the attack speed stacking debuff is pretty important to the set and probably the most notable. Others that are notable, Armor Shred, you have like Yone and Vi. I think there's some, and Last Whisper. Those no longer stack duplicatively. You just take the higher of the two. Like I said, this is mostly an overhaul for the long run of TFT. We'll see times where this is probably more relevant than it will be now, but it's something to keep an eye on when you're dealing with like similar types of debuffs. Chosen odds. So the level 7 roll odds have changed once again. You no longer have a 5% chance of getting a 4-star chosen at level 7. It's now 2%. There are both positive and negative aspects to this change. I think a lot of the higher tier players will like this change, mostly because it puts higher priority on playing well through the mid game. Because people who don't play well through the mid game ending up having to do full roll downs on 7. They high roll a chosen here, and they can get a top 4 out of that when they played like shit the whole game. So that's like the high tier player perspective. My perspective is a little bit different. I'm of the opinion that this makes like high roll games more high roll. It makes it much harder for players to come back when they're rolling at 7. So what this means, in general, like my opinion on when you roll at 7, you're often, especially when you're rolling a lot of gold, you're forfeiting your ability to like top 2. You're just like praying to top 4. I'm not quite sure that that's a great way to like view playing this game. It's not fun like try harding to make a top 4. It's much more fun try harding to win a game. But like when you have to go all out just to top 4, that can be a little rough. And I think this just increases that by making it so the level 7 roll down odds are lower. The higher tier players who like had a much stronger mid game are way better off. They can just hoard their gold, get to 8, take their hits from everyone who rolled down at 7, and get to level 8 before they do their roll down, and not have to worry as much about getting blown out to people who roll down at 7. You'll still get blown out by people who roll down at 7. Don't get me wrong, but you don't have to worry about them hitting chosens. That's the odds here are just so low that you're almost never gonna see a 4-star chosen level 7. If you do, you should take it because like you hit the lotto, bro. Trait changes. Keeper shield amount. So I don't know if you knew this. 6 keeper became a thing. So they lowered the 6 keeper shield amount by 25. This is fair. The keeper build kind of got out of control pretty quickly, and there's a lot of builds that it can straight up like win against. Well, there's a handful of builds it has no shot. I think Kale in particular is very good against it, and Kale's a very good build. Whereas some other ones, I believe, like Keeper's actually pretty good against Slayer, if I recall. Vanguard. Cute fact about Vanguard, I did not know. Vanguard 8 is actually the highest performing trait in the game. I had no idea that was a true fact. Not a clue. I kind of expected... So, the Vanguard change was needed because Vanguards, like, clearly were the class of frontline. Like, blowing everything out. And I was of the opinion most of that was due to the magic resist that they added. And as you can tell, they killed the magic resist pretty hard on 2 Vanguard and 4 Vanguard. Especially here. The 4 Vanguard, I was like, this needed to happen. Because getting 40 MR for having 4 Vanguard, like, why do we even have Mystics when we can just play more Vanguards to get more MR on our front line? But, so, they nerfed Vanguard 8, and they took a lot of MR out of all of the Vanguards. With the exception of 8, they didn't really need to take out of 8. 80 MR once we get up to Vanguard 8 doesn't matter. It was the 1,000 extra armor that they were getting. So I much welcome this change. These are both good changes. Champion changes. All of these are new. So these weren't on the patch notes that came out on Sunday. And I'm much happier to see these than anything else on those patch notes. So for those who haven't been following, we had this pretty significant reroll meta. And basically everyone was just re-rolling. There were only a couple of builds that you would get up to, like level 7, level 8, and roll down. You were just going to hit you just picked a re-roll comp and re-rolled it, and hopefully you already had a chosen for it. And it was like easy clap. So in return, they destroyed all the re-roll comps, and basically almost all of them were unplayable. But we're getting some of that power back. So if you find a chosen on these 1-cost units, re-rolling's not a bad option. You can do it pretty easily top 4. I don't think any of these now are going to get you a first. But you can re-roll, get your top 4, and be pretty happy with it. Play your brain dead comp to get free LP, as I like to talk about re-roll. Anyway, the changes themselves. Diana's getting her shield back. I don't know why they utterly destroyed her shield so much, but they're bringing back a lot of the power back into her shield, which needed. Nasus. So Nasus got a buff on the last B patch, if I recall, that brought his mana cost down to 10. By 10. Not 210, that would be absurd. By 10. They've now gone back and upped his damage on his 3-cost alt. I thought Nasus at the time of the B patch was probably one of the safer ones to reroll. This, he might actually be pretty good. Nasus reroll might actually be a pretty good comp to play. Nidalee, so the Nidalee here is interesting. First off, Nidalee got a complete rework from the reroll champion that she was, because Nidalee Reroll was like a free first. I have like 4 games where I got first off Nidalee Reroll. It's just dumb. It's absurd how powerful that composition was. So they reworked her entirely, so that way she was more like the League of Legends champion, where you got bonus damage for how far the spear traveled, rather than just getting the straight up damage, which made it so that if units were on top of her, she wouldn't kill anything. So what does this mean now that they've brought down her mana cost by 10? So to start off, it's not that Nidalee Reroll is going to be good anymore. It's still not good, because of her functionality is just that she can't carry until you have a strong front line. What this does, it's make it so that if you decide that you're going to run 4 sharpshooter with her, she can very easily get off a lot of ults really quickly with Sojins. But the problem is, you're going to be running at least 3 champions if you do that. Which means you've already devoted 3 characters to that, and now you have to devote a frontline, because Nidalee is awful without a frontline now. You need to have a strong frontline that keeps units not just off her, but away from her. So I suspect that this does make 4 sharpshooter better, but I don't think it's going to like be the end game comp you want it to be, nor do I think Nidalee is going to be a carry throughout the game. I do think 4 sharpshooter is decent to play through the mid game, but I think you have to transition out and you don't reroll Nidalee. That's kind of my thought on this change. It'll be interesting to see how it works out. I most certainly would not be 3-still rerolling her, but playing 4 sharpshooter with a good front line, that I could see being something that's pretty good to do. Yasuo's ult damage, they up the percentages. I don't know why they brought them down in the nerf patch. Like, Duelist was already one of the more weaker reroll comps. It didn't win. It was good. It just didn't win unless you had like a nut Yone. But anyway, they brought it back up, so I think it's perfectly fine to play Duelist reroll. Tier 2 changes. Janna 2 and 3 get nerfs to her ult. Thank God. Janna 2 is actually pretty busted. I'm not going to lie. I think Janna 2 is like one of the best performing 2 costs in the game. Especially in like the mid to the early mid game areas, like stage 2 and 3. Like, Janna straight up can carry those stages. It's kind of ridiculous. Lulu gets a small buff. Very slight. Lulu's already pretty good. This actually makes her a little bit better, but not so much as I'm going to point her out and say she's busted. Tier 3 changes. These ones are kind of spicy to me. So, Akali's ult is getting a damage buff across the board. Across the board. That's... I think this is actually very meaningful. I think this makes Akali reroll pretty good, like something you can play. Probably it'll either probably be 6 assassin with some variant of units that I can't think of, or it'll be just ninja assassins where you run 4 assassins, 4 ninjas, unless you have a spat, and then you run 6 ninjas, or 6 assassins. I mean 6 ninjas. That would be wild. Can you imagine the buffs on that? So I'm pretty happy with this change, because this basically just adds an entire new comp to the game that people aren't currently playing. The question will still be forever, what items do we put on Akali? We know RFC, and we know nothing else. I'm honestly not sure what you put on Akali anymore either. My assumption is that it's RFC and IE, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think we put blue buff on her anymore. Yeah. But I do think that Akali reroll will be a decent comp, and you can play ninjas with it, and it'll be pretty good. Next up, Sivir. Sivir 3 stars getting a nerf. It needed a nerf. I don't know why Sivir does this much damage. It's actually kind of insane to me that she just does this much damage. But, yeah, they nerfed her. Veigar also gets a buff across the board. I actually really, really like this change. One of the issues with Veigar right now is that he's often used as an item holder for Acel. But it's not uncommon to get to that point in the game, roll down, and not find Acel. So you're just kind of stuck with this Veigar. You might not even have Vigar itemized. You might have something else itemized because you were planning on transitioning those items to Asol and keeping the Vigar. This gives you the option when you do your level 7 roll down to pray to God to survive the game, that you can just go for 3-star Vigar. Just like, screw Asol, just go for the Vigar carry. That's perfectly viable, in my opinion, to do, especially with these changes. I'm most happy to see they finally buffed 1-star. 1-star Vigar is so weak, he's almost like not even worth playing. He doesn't kill anything, and it's really depressing to play 1-star Vigar. Tier 4 changes. Asol. We'll get to the relevant of this. This is an interaction with Trapclaw. We'll go ahead and talk about it now. So, depending on how far Asol was away from the Trapclaw user, it was possible for him to ult before the Trapclaw procced. So he would ult, the Trapclaw would proc, but he'd ult again before the Trapclaw hit him. Awkward. That said, I'm not of the opinion that that's very relevant, to be honest, because his overcharge lasts for, I believe, 10 seconds. So when he ults again, he's just going to kill everything anyway. A better interaction would have been Trapclaw just like preventing the second cast happening at all. But that's kind of just my opinion. I don't really like how Asol's built. Just kind of my opinion. Asol's kind of frustrating to play against. Morgana, remove tooltip bug. Sejuani got well, technically an adjustment, but really it's a buff because they only, it's a nerf because they only buffed the 3-star variant. But they nerfed the stun time. I'm kind of surprised that happened. Sejuani's kind of just an easy add-in for a lot of comps. Just makes any composition better because you get this like gigantic AoE stun that's kind of out of control. That oftentimes was like stunning to prevent units from using ults that just kind of died. And that's kind of frustrating to play against, especially when you position Sejuani particularly well. Next, Samira. So have you ever died to a Samira Deathblade? Did you know that Samira 1 with Deathblade kind of just is a world destroyer and destroys everything? Well, they worked to change that. So, the way Samira's ult now works is it deals base damage along with a percentage of her AD. So it's not all damage based off AD, it's now base damage plus a percentage of AD. So what does this mean? It means Deathblade is no longer insane on her. It also makes some interesting numbers that we're going to have to work with to figure out how to itemize Samira. So, like I said, they added this base damage to her. And don't forget, this is like 18, 20 shots that she does. It's obscene number of shots times this number. That also can sharpshooter proc. And they changed this AD scaling because they added this base damage. This makes like base Samira unitemized a lot better, but not great. So in terms of like how I think you itemize Samira now, Last Whisper is still busted on her. Like Last Whisper is still a great choice to put on Samira. After that, I'm curious how the scaling on both of these works with Death Cap. Death Cap was something you just didn't put on Samira because it didn't do anything. But with these two scaling, and I'm assuming they scale with AP, it might be worth looking at. Just a thought. After that, I mean, you can still put Deathblade on her, and Deathblade will still be okay. But we're going to talk more about Deathblade later. Lastly, Yone's Unforgotten is going down to 10 mana. It basically means that you don't have to put blue buff to make Yone destroy everything. You can just kind of play Yone, and it'll be fine. I actually kind of like this. This is a good change to Yone. Yone was kind of like all over the place, where if he lived throughout a battle, he kind of destroyed everything, but if he, like, kind of... He often would just kind of get chomped down occasionally, and it was like, that's weird. Anyway, item changes. Deathblade stacks. So the starting stacks on Deathblade goes from 4 to 3. I don't know if you knew this, but 4 Deathblade stacks added 40 AD onto whatever unit you put it on. It's a lot of AD to be adding in the early game. It basically made Deathblade a better item than IE in the early game on anything that wasn't an assassin. Which is awkward, because it probably shouldn't work like that. Static Shiv, small damage buff. We're not going to talk about Static Shiv. Triple's Missile now travels significantly faster, so it's supposed to counter ASOL. I'm of the opinion that it really doesn't. He still gets a second cast off with the overcharge. If it was preventing the overcharge cast from being blown up, I'd be fine with this. Whatever. UI changes. So you no longer can sell your minion, your champion in round 1, if you did this by accident. Remove target dummy from the interface. This one I'm very happy about because I committed this sin a lot. Anytime that you're changing back from carousel to your own board, it was the end of a carousel round, oftentimes I would go to click the button to go back, but that button would become my shop and I would buy the champion there. That was always awkward. They have gotten rid of that. Bug fixes. Jarvan now casts better with Mage Cap. Multiple Callistas now works. In case you didn't know, if the Callista that had the first spear put in was the one that had to do the execute. So if that one died, it would never execute. Awkward bug. Fixed for people who like to play 50,000 Callistas, whoever you are. Galio targets better. There was an issue with Aatrox targeting with Galio. When Aatrox would pull things in and Galio would land on things. There was an issue with that targeting. Tryndamere's Spinning Slash can no longer benefit from the basic attack damage bonus. So this one I found out was actually really interesting. It turns out that when Tryndamere does his Spinning Slash, so as you know, the way his ult works, he will do 3 auto attacks like super fast after that Spinning Slash animation. Apparently, it is a very common feature that Tryndamere would get his ult back during those 3 auto attacks, and he would ult before they finished, meaning that he would give the buff, that attack speed damage buff, during his ult, because his ult was essentially attack everything once within that chain. So you can get Rage Blade stacks off that, just so you know. So technically, this bug fix is probably a nerf. Technically. Just saying. What is a buff was they changed how he functioned with Hurricane. So Hurricane was consuming stacks of Spinning Slash attack damage bonus. What this means is when he does his ult, those 3 attacks that he got, one of them was going to Hurricane, which meant he would only attack twice in that case with the attack speed buff. So this, I believe, is technically a buff to Tryndamere, but only when he's using Hurricane, which Hurricane's actually a good item on him, I think. Maybe. They fixed the trade item bug. So when a player surrendered from a game, if they had a unit with a trade item on it, it would occasionally show up in the carousel or a shop. And that had some like serious unintended consequences for the game. I believe if you were watching some of the tournament VODs from last weekend, that this actually happened mid-tournament to a player. And he kind of crushed that lobby because of it. They fixed that. This was a pretty bad bug. I've seen it happen 3 or 4 times. It makes high rolls that shouldn't happen. And it's kind of pretty egregious. I'm glad it's fixed, but I'm surprised it's been around for as long as it's been. Chonk now belly flopped. Thumbs up. And in case you didn't know the player that happened to, here you go. Anyway, overall, I'm actually like fairly happy with this patch. Probably the only real change that I kind of had gripes with is the level 4 chosen rolled the level 4 chosens, but that's a lose-lose situation when you change that. I think making the change just kind of better supports higher level of play, I suspect, and that's probably in the end why they did it. Either way, I'll be happy when the chosen mechanic's gone in set 5. Chosen mechanics wore its time out to me. Anyway, that's it for this patch. I'm sorry this video kind of went very long. I kind of rambled about a lot of the changes that were made, but there was a lot of really good changes in here that I think are going to last throughout the duration of the set. I'm not expecting a lot of changes on set 4 for the rest of its lifespan. But anyway, hope everyone enjoyed this. See you in the game. Peace.